There is a moment in history when the world holds its breath, when the balance of military power, global commerce, and international diplomacy all converge on a single narrow waterway. That moment is happening right now. 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most strategically vital choke points on the face of the earth. Every single day, roughly 20% of the world's total oil supply passes through those waters. Tankers from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran itself all navigate that thin blue corridor. And for decades, the Islamic Republic of Iran has understood something that the rest of the world cannot afford to ignore. Whoever controls the Strait of Hormuz holds enormous leverage over the global economy. Today, that leverage is being challenged. The United States military is moving with unmistakable urgency. Thousands of American service members are already positioned throughout the Middle East. The legendary 82nd Airborne Division is on its way. The United States Navy is surging assets into the region. And President Donald Trump has delivered what amounts to a final warning to Tehran: come to the negotiating table seriously and do it before it is too late. Because what is reportedly being discussed behind closed doors in Washington is nothing short of a final blow scenario. An overwhelming display of American military force designed to bring Iran, in the words now circulating in military and diplomatic circles, essentially to its knees. This is not saber-rattling for political effect. The strategic options being considered are specific, detailed, and consequential. The stakes extend far beyond American foreign policy. They touch the energy security of Europe, the economic lifelines of Asia, the territorial claims of America's Gulf partners, and the question of nearly 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium that may be buried beneath Iranian soil following the strikes of June 2025. What happens in the coming days and weeks could reshape the Middle East for a generation. To understand the full scope of what is now unfolding, it is important to lay out the core elements of this developing confrontation with precision and clarity. The United States military buildup in the Middle East is not new, but its current scale and speed represent a significant escalation in posture. The deployment of 82nd Airborne units, one of the Army's most elite rapid reaction forces, signals that ground force options are being actively maintained. The 82nd Airborne is specifically designed for exactly this kind of contingency, units that can be mobilized and deployed globally within 18 hours. Their movement toward the region is a deliberate and unmistakable message. Simultaneously, the United States Navy's presence in and around the Persian Gulf has been dramatically reinforced. Naval assets, including carrier strike groups and surface combatants capable of projecting air power deep into Iranian territory, are now positioned throughout the region. The United States Central Command, known as CENTCOM, has reported an extraordinary number of successful strikes against Iranian military infrastructure in recent weeks, degrading Tehran's missile arsenal, its drone capabilities, and significant portions of its conventional military power projection capacity. At the center of this confrontation is the Strait of Hormuz itself and the specific military geography that surrounds it. The waterway is bounded by a series of islands and choke points, each of which carries enormous strategic significance. At the western entrance to the strait sits a small but critically positioned island that serves as a gatekeeper to the entire waterway. The United Arab Emirates, a close American ally in the region, has long claimed that this island rightfully belongs to them. However, Iran has maintained physical control over it, and the dispute over its sovereignty traces back more than 50 years to 1971. The strategic importance of this island cannot be overstated. Its position in the middle of the Persian Gulf allows whoever controls it to monitor, harass, or interdict maritime traffic entering or exiting the strait. Further into the waterway sits another Iranian-controlled island that is described as being loaded with Iranian military infrastructure. This installation is reportedly capable of targeting passing ships with a variety of weapon systems. The presence of this kind of offensive capability in the middle of one of the world's most critical shipping lanes represents a constant and ongoing threat to international commercial navigation. Any serious military campaign aimed at securing freedom of navigation through the strait would require neutralizing or capturing this position. Then there is Karg Island, a name that has come up repeatedly in recent weeks and one that carries enormous economic weight. Karg Island is Iran's primary oil export hub. According to intelligence and commercial shipping assessments, approximately 90% of all Iranian oil exports flow through Karg Island. It was the subject of initial strikes earlier in the conflict, but military analysts and strategic planners now believe that additional critical infrastructure targets remain on the island. Specifically, targets tied to pipelines, oil processing, and military installations. These remaining targets are described as being more crucial than those already struck, meaning Karg Island is almost certainly still on the target list if a comprehensive military campaign is authorized. And then there is the most consequential and most dangerous element of all, the question of Iran's nuclear material. Reports indicate that approximately 900 pounds of highly enriched uranium, which is material that could potentially be weaponized, remains buried underground following the June 2025 strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. The question of what to do about that material is one of the most complex and urgent in the entire conflict. Two options are said to be under active consideration. The first is a ground operation designed to physically secure the material and remove it from Iranian territory. An extraordinarily complex and dangerous mission that would require special operations forces, detailed intelligence, and rapid extraction capability. The second option is an air campaign designed to render the material unusable, essentially destroying or burying it so deeply that it could never be weaponized. Both options carry enormous risks, and both options are reportedly on the table. To understand how the United States and Iran arrived at this extraordinary moment, it is necessary to go back, not just months, but decades. The Islamic Republic of Iran's relationship with the United States has been defined by hostility since the revolution of 1979, when radical students, with the backing of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, seized the American embassy in Tehran and held 52 American diplomats hostage for 444 days. That event shattered diplomatic relations between the two nations and set in motion more than 4 decades of confrontation, proxy conflict, and mutual hostility that has never fully resolved. Throughout the 1980s, Iran fought a brutal 8-year war against Iraq, a conflict in which the United States eventually tilted toward Baghdad, cementing Iranian suspicion of American intentions in the region. During the 1990s and into the 2000s, Iran quietly accelerated its nuclear program while simultaneously expanding its network of proxy militias across the Middle East. Hezbollah in Lebanon, various Shia militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, all became instruments of Iranian power projection, allowing Tehran to extend its influence without direct military confrontation with superior Western forces. The nuclear question reached a critical juncture during the Obama administration, when years of economic sanctions and diplomatic pressure eventually produced the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal. Under that agreement, Iran agreed to significant limitations on its nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of international sanctions. The deal was controversial from the beginning. Critics argued it did not go far enough in restricting Iran's nuclear ambitions and failed entirely to address Iran's ballistic missile program and its support for regional proxy forces. Supporters argued it successfully delayed Iran's path to a nuclear weapon and represented the best achievable diplomatic outcome. In 2018, during his first term in office, President Trump withdrew the United States from the Iran nuclear deal, calling it the worst deal ever negotiated. He reimposed sweeping economic sanctions on Tehran under a strategy his administration called maximum pressure. Iran's economy contracted sharply. The Iranian rial lost a catastrophic portion of its value. Ordinary Iranians suffered significant economic hardship, but the Iranian regime did not collapse and its nuclear program resumed and accelerated. By the time the current conflict began, Iran was assessed to be at or very near the threshold of nuclear weapons capability, possessing enough enriched uranium and centrifuge capacity to build a nuclear device in a matter of weeks, if not days. The military conflict that has now unfolded represents the most direct and consequential confrontation between the United States and Iran in the history of their adversarial relationship. And the stakes, freedom of global navigation, nuclear non-proliferation, regional stability, could not be higher. The key individuals shaping this confrontation come from very different worlds, but their actions and decisions over the coming days will determine the outcome of this crisis. President Donald Trump is, as he was during his first term, the central decision-maker on the American side. Known for his willingness to apply maximum pressure and his comfort with military brinksmanship, Trump has made clear through his public statements that he views the current military posture as leverage in a negotiating process. His track record in this region includes the 2020 killing of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, the leader of Iran's Quds Force, an action that brought the two nations to the brink of direct conflict before de-escalation occurred. Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy and close confidant, has emerged as a central figure in the diplomatic dimension of this crisis. Witkoff has been described as presenting Iranian negotiators with a list of 15 specific items that the United States is demanding Iran concede to as part of any agreement that would halt the military campaign. The gap between what Washington is demanding and what Tehran is prepared to offer is, according to those familiar with the negotiations, enormous. As one analyst with direct knowledge of the situation described it, the two sides are not even in the same ballpark. They are in different area codes. Retired intelligence officer Captain Todd, who spent more than 25 years in the military advising on Middle East affairs, including service with CENTCOM, the Fifth Fleet, and Joint Staff Headquarters, offers a particularly clear-eyed assessment of where things stand. His analysis draws on decades of direct experience with Iranian military planning and strategic thinking. His perspective provides crucial insight into how Iran views this conflict and what it will take to reach any kind of resolution. On the Iranian side, the regime's leadership, weakened economically but still firmly in control of the instruments of state power, views this conflict through the lens of what Captain Todd describes as total war. For the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, for Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei and the clerical establishment that surrounds him, regime survival is the paramount objective. Everything else is secondary. Every dollar that the Iranian government has spent in recent years, as observers have noted, has gone into military capability and regime protection. The Iranian people, the country's deteriorating infrastructure, its collapsing economy, all of these have been sacrificed on the altar of regime preservation. The multidimensional impact of this confrontation extends across virtually every sphere of global affairs. The political implications for the United States are significant and complex. President Trump is pursuing this military diplomatic campaign at a moment of considerable domestic and international scrutiny. The decision to deploy the 82nd Airborne and surge naval assets into the region represents a major commitment of American military resources. Congress will inevitably be drawn into debates about war powers, authorization, and the scope of the military campaign. The War Powers Resolution of 1973, passed in the wake of the Vietnam War, requires the President to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing American forces to hostilities and limits unauthorized deployments to 60 days. As the scale of American military activity in the region grows, these statutory requirements will come under increasing scrutiny. The economic implications are global in scope and immediate in effect. The Strait of Hormuz is not merely important to American economic interests, it is a critical artery for the entire global economy. Japan imports the overwhelming majority of its oil through the strait. South Korea, India, China, and much of Europe depend on the safe passage of tankers through these waters. Any sustained closure of the strait, or even a prolonged period of heightened risk, would drive energy prices sharply higher across the world. The economic damage of a strait closure, even a temporary one, would be measured in trillions of dollars in lost economic activity, higher inflation, and supply chain disruption. This is precisely why Gulf Cooperation Council states, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and Oman are so deeply invested in seeing this conflict reach a resolution that guarantees freedom of navigation. The social and humanitarian dimensions of this conflict are equally significant. Iran's population of roughly 85 million people has suffered under decades of mismanagement, corruption, and international isolation. Captain Todd noted that between 80 and 90% of ordinary Iranians do not support the regime and the power it has accumulated. These are the people, students, professionals, teachers, entrepreneurs, who have taken to the streets repeatedly over the years in protest movements that have been violently suppressed. The current military conflict places these ordinary Iranians in an extraordinarily difficult position, caught between a regime that has consistently failed them and a military campaign that, however precisely targeted, inevitably affects civilian infrastructure and the broader economy. The legal and constitutional questions surrounding the American military campaign are substantial. The United States has not formally declared war on Iran. The legal basis for the ongoing military operations rests on a complex foundation of executive authority, existing authorizations for the use of military force, and the inherent right of self-defense under international law. Iran's actions in threatening international shipping, its support for proxy forces that have attacked American troops and allies, and its pursuit of nuclear weapons capability all provide legal justifications that American officials have cited. But as the scope of potential military action expands, particularly if it comes to include ground operations to secure nuclear material, the legal and constitutional questions will intensify. Internationally, the reactions to the American military buildup and the prospect of a final blow scenario are varied and consequential. American allies in Europe have long taken a more cautious approach to the Iran question, preferring diplomatic engagement over military confrontation. The escalation of the conflict to its current level will put significant pressure on the transatlantic alliance. Asian nations that depend heavily on Persian Gulf oil, particularly Japan and South Korea, are watching the situation with profound concern. China, which imports enormous quantities of Iranian oil and has worked to position itself as an alternative guarantor of regional security, will be forced to reckon with the implications of an American military campaign that reshapes the strategic landscape of the Persian Gulf. Political analysts observing this situation note that the Gulf Cooperation Council states appear to be firmly aligned with the American position. The UAE's claim to the disputed island at the entrance to the strait is just one indication of how deeply the Gulf states are invested in the outcome of this confrontation. Saudi Arabia, which has long viewed Iran as its principal regional rival and which has its own massive economic stake in free navigation through the strait, is believed to be quietly supportive of American military objectives. As Captain Todd observed, the Gulf states want to see this through to a conclusion that is favorable to them, one that guarantees their economic freedom and eliminates the Iranian threat to regional stability. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, or IRGCN, deserves particular attention as a remaining threat capability that has survived the early stages of the military campaign. Going into this conflict, intelligence estimates suggested that Iran possessed between 1,000 and 2,000 small boats capable of carrying explosive warheads, rockets, and small arms. An additional 150 to 200 larger vessels were assessed as capable of carrying torpedoes, explosive boats, or anti-ship cruise missiles. This asymmetric naval force, cheap, numerous, and operating in waters it knows intimately, remains a significant threat to American naval assets and commercial shipping in the Strait, even as American air power has significantly degraded its effectiveness. A-10 Warthog ground attack aircraft, Apache AH-64 helicopters, and other air assets have been described as having what amounts to free rein in the airspace over the Strait of Hormuz, methodically rolling back Iranian naval capability and setting conditions for whatever operational options the president may ultimately choose. The broader pattern of recent events provides important context for where things stand today. Over the past 30 to 60 days, CENTCOM has reported a remarkable series of successful strikes against Iranian military infrastructure. Iran's long-range missile program, the capability that gave Tehran the ability to threaten targets not just in Southwest Asia, but as far away as Diego Garcia and into Europe, has been described as significantly degraded. The drone threat that Iran used to hold American bases and its regional partners at risk has also been substantially reduced. These are not trivial accomplishments. They represent a systematic campaign to dismantle Iran's ability to project conventional military power beyond its borders. At the same time, Iran has continued to assert its position. Tehran's demand for sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, one of the 15 items reportedly on its negotiating list, reveals the profound gap between Iranian and American objectives. As Captain Todd noted, the traffic separation scheme that governs commercial navigation through the strait actually runs through Omani waters, not Iranian waters. Iran's claim to sovereignty over the strait is not merely legally questionable, it is fundamentally compatible with the interests of every other nation that uses the waterway, including the Gulf states that depend on it for their economic survival. Looking ahead, several critical developments will determine how this confrontation resolves. The immediate question is whether Iran's leadership, facing overwhelming military pressure and the prospect of a final blow scenario, will make the strategic calculation that survival requires genuine negotiation. The 15-item American demand list is expansive and represents a fundamental restructuring of Iran's regional behavior, its nuclear program, and its maritime posture. Whether Iran's leadership can accept any version of those demands while maintaining the internal political credibility it needs to survive is a question that only Tehran can answer. The question of the highly enriched uranium buried beneath Iranian soil is perhaps the most time-sensitive element of all. The longer that material remains in place, the greater the risk that it could be moved, dispersed, or otherwise protected from either a ground extraction operation or an air campaign. American military planners are acutely aware of this dynamic, and the clock is running. The role of America's Gulf partners in any final resolution will also be crucial. As the analysis has made clear, the GCC states have enormous stakes in this outcome and strong preferences about how it should conclude. Their quiet support for American military objectives, their territorial claims to disputed islands in the Strait, and their economic dependence on free navigation all make them indispensable partners in whatever diplomatic or military endgame emerges. Congressional oversight of the military campaign is also likely to intensify. As deployments grow and military operations expand, pressure will build on the administration to seek formal authorization for the use of military force. The coming weeks may well see significant activity on Capitol Hill as lawmakers grapple with their constitutional responsibilities in a time of undeclared but very real military conflict. What this extraordinary moment in history ultimately reveals is the extent to which the unresolved tensions of the past 4 decades between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran, between the aspirations of the Iranian people and the grip of their regime, between the demands of global commerce and the ambitions of a theocratic state, have finally arrived at a reckoning. The military deployments are real, the targets are identified, the options are on the table, and the stakes for the global economy, for nuclear non-proliferation, for the future stability of the Middle East, and for the millions of ordinary people on all sides who will live with the consequences, could not be higher. President Trump's message to Tehran is clear, direct, and backed by an extraordinary concentration of American military power. Negotiate seriously and do so now before the window closes entirely. Whether Iran's leadership can hear that message clearly enough to act on it, or whether the logic of total war and regime survival will push them toward a confrontation they cannot win, is the question that will define this moment in history. The Strait of Hormuz has stood at the crossroads of civilizations for millennia. The empires that sought to control it have come and gone. What will not go away is the simple, irreducible reality that 21 miles of water connects the oil fields of the Persian Gulf to the economies of the world. Securing the freedom of that passage is not merely an American interest, it is a global one. And for the first time in a very long time, the United States appears both willing and able to guarantee it, by diplomacy, if possible, and by force, if necessary. This is Martha McCallum reporting. We will continue to follow every development in this rapidly evolving situation and bring you the latest as it happens.